Hey everyone, it's Josh D'Alessandro again, and this is the Optimal You podcast. This entire page is about defining the type of program, the type of exercise, and the type of nutrition you're going to have specifically for yourself. You know, there's a lot of different outlets and a lot of different forms of exposure in terms of exercise and nutrition that other people are doing, or that celebrities are doing, or that you read in a magazine as opposed to a scientific journal, or something that you picked up from a friend, for example, who did have success and says that maybe you should try this. A lot of the times we spend a little too much time worrying about others and worrying about external sources as opposed to just taking a step back, isolating ourselves from the external noise and allowing ourselves to put together the plan that will benefit us top to bottom. Okay, so today's episode is similar to episode 2. In episode 2, we talked about the difference between exercise and our diet and nutrition. And if you haven't noticed up to this point, I am not a huge fan of dieting. I think it's actually a very dangerous way of restricting yourself and also closing yourself off to the things that you specifically need as a person. A lot of the times we take on a diet for pretty desperate measures, whether it's to lose a ton of weight in a very short span of time. And I discussed all of this in the previous podcast, so please hop over to that one. And if you have any lingering questions from those 2 podcasts, please let me know as well. So today we're going to be talking about the difference between exercise and general physical activity. So the difference between this podcast and the last podcast is that I approve of both exercise and general activity. I think that a combination of the 2 things in your life is going to be very valuable. However, I do put a strong emphasis on prioritizing exercise, not necessarily over general activity, but making sure that it is a priority. Okay, so when we think general physical activity, that could include a myriad of different things. That could be simply walking up and down the stairs at the office. That could be, walking around the home or cleaning in the house, which could sometimes take up to an hour. That could be unloading a car, for example, that has a lot of boxes. And it can also be just planned general activity. For example, my employees and my colleagues like to make fun of me because they say that I'm an 80-year-old man trapped in a 28-year-old's body. I like to go take walks by the water. And no, I'm not feeding pigeons yet, but I'm definitely getting close to that point now. So I like to take my walks throughout the day, especially when my mind is getting really, really closed off and I feel kind of trapped in my office. And it's really helpful mentally to kind of just block out everything that's been going on and allow myself to kind of just release it all. But I also think it's really helpful to maintain your general physical activity as a way to maintain caloric burning and also to allow your muscles the chance to elongate themselves and get into a range of motion that sitting is definitely not going to do. One of the biggest problems that we have in this society is we sit all the time. I swear sometimes I find people sitting in just situations where I can't even fathom it. It's like I saw someone sitting when they were waiting online at Starbucks, and I'm like, this line is not substantial enough for you to be sitting there. This coffee is probably not going to help you all that much if we're at that point. So when we sit, we have a lot of different issues. We might develop tightened muscles. For example, our hip flexors might get really tight, which is those big muscles that run up through the middle of the body. And that can cause low back pain. A lot of the times when we sit, we're also leaning forward and we're also, typing something. So our shoulders round like crazy, which could put problems on the other parts of our spine. Our hips are completely inactive, and so are our glutes. And believe it or not, the butt muscles or the glute muscles are the biggest in the human body. So obviously Sir Mix-a-Lot was onto something there because it is very valuable and we need to keep them active. We need to keep them moving. Our muscles can get mad at us just like our metabolism can get mad at us, and that's what we were discussing in the previous episode. So now that you have kind of an understanding of what general physical activity is, I think it's very, very valuable to go take your walk, 15, 20 minutes, even a couple of days if you can. If you find that you're in an office setting, you need to get up and move, whether that means doing 5 minutes of jumping jacks every hour or 2 hours, or dynamic movements, which we will talk about as well. And if you have specific questions regarding the type of movements you can be doing in an office setting, or even if you're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home parent in general. There's a large list of things you can do to allow each part of the body to move in a way it needs to. Okay, but now let's talk about exercise. So to me, exercise is something that a lot of us say we're going to do, and it requires a lot more planning than general physical activity. General physical activity, there are a lot of people that honestly don't move enough at all. So, with a lot of my patients and some of my clients, even, I say you just need to go out and walk for a little bit. And that's great because it is definitely above what their previous threshold for physical activity was. However, exercise is planned physical activity intended to improve some aspect of physiological performance. So, what I mean when I say that is that exercise is intended to improve endurance, to improve muscular size and muscular strength, to improve power or flexibility, for example. General physical activity and walking around is going to get you moving, and it's going to get heart rate flowing, and it might get, some general benefit in terms of caloric deficit. But in terms of leading to physiological adaptation of the human body, that is going to require exercise. That is going to require you to step out of the confines of your day to day life and challenge your body in a way it has not been challenged before. If you go for a 15, 20-minute walk, some of you might feel a little winded, but after a few weeks, that's probably going to go away. When it comes to exercise, the threshold is so substantial compared to what you're doing on a regular basis that your body starts to make changes, right? So we're always talking about these physiological changes, but most of the time we think aesthetic changes. And one thing I want everyone to understand as we go forward is, personally for me, I struggle with the aesthetic side of things. Who doesn't want the exterior to reflect the hard work? But then again, we're always going to be pushing ourselves and we're always our biggest critics. So what we need to do is kind of step back away from the mirror and understand what's happening to our body now that we're exercising. Not that we're just generally active, which could definitely lead to some weight loss. It could lead to some energy increase and better decisions when it comes to food. But when we exercise, things happen very rapidly. There is a cascade of physiological adaptations. For example, when you start weight training, in the first 2 to 3 weeks, you are already considerably stronger than you were in that first week. And that's because of something known as neurological adaptation. Your brain is thanking you. Your brain is saying, oh my goodness, this is so much more complicated. We need to develop new neurological connection with the muscles in the body that are being used right now. So within that small frame or small time frame, you're already getting stronger. We always talk about immediate results. Not only are those results immediate, they're also very natural, very healthy, and it means that you're off to a great start. Okay. And then by 4 to 6 weeks in, that's when we start talking about the changes in the aesthetic, but more along the lines of the muscle fibers starting to grow, right? And the muscle fibers starting to improve their cellular makeup. So we'll talk about the benefit of aerobic versus anaerobic training and a resistance training versus cardiovascular training. I myself believe that every single person, every single athlete can benefit from all types of training. When I was a collegiate strength coach, I worked with cross country and I also worked with football. And cross country athletes were lifting, football players were doing conditioning. There's no reason for every person or athlete to not have some aspect of all the individual components of overall health. Training is complex. The human body is complex. You need to treat it as the organism that it is. Okay, so what my statement here is, or what my conclusion is here when it comes to exercise versus general physical activity, is general physical activity is step one. For a lot of people, that is a huge, monumental step to be taking. It's so difficult to go from a life of fear, right? Some people don't even want to go outside for a walk because they feel embarrassed. The only reason you should be embarrassed in that situation is because you're stopping yourself from doing what you need to do, okay? And once you overcome that first step, every single step gets smaller and smaller in terms of its stress on you. You're going to take bigger leaps and it's going to feel effortless, okay? So you need to start with the general physical activity. Then you need to segue into exercise. Planning throughout the week. I'm going to go to the gym, or you don't even have to go to the gym. If you're outside doing squats, push-ups, walking up a hill as opposed to just walking. Those are forms of exercise because you specifically plan to do them a certain way for a certain cause, right? And you hear me say the word you a lot. I don't care what somebody else said you should do. If someone told you to do something and then you thought to yourself, I definitely don't think I would enjoy that, or that definitely doesn't seem like something I should do based on what I know about myself, then don't. But you definitely need to take a step back and realize if you're severely overweight, you probably shouldn't be doing plyometrics, right? If you are very, very endurance trained, but you haven't really strength trained before, you shouldn't go right to 3 plates on a deadlift. Okay, there are steps that need to be taken for every single person, and that's really just understanding your baseline, where you're at to begin with. So, as I said, we'll definitely get into the details of all those types of training. And then with general physical activity and exercise together, I think they go hand in hand in the sense that general exercise helps you recover from really hard workouts. So, for example, I work out Monday through Saturday, and then on Sunday, I take my little grandpa stroll around the neighborhood, you know, petting all the whippersnappers on their heads and just enjoying the day because, exercise and training specifically is very challenging. It's very taxing on the body. It leads to pretty significant muscle breakdown. If you don't sleep well enough and you don't eat well enough, it might be very tough to recover from those workouts, which can be very dangerous. We will definitely talk about nutrition and habits of recovery for exercise, but that day that you kind of take for yourself, or multiple days, when you get started, 5, 6 training days a week is not a great idea. You might not recover from something like that. That's a big issue that I run into with a lot of my clients and my patients is they just want to run at 150 miles an hour when they need to know how to walk for themselves. Okay, so if you're even training 3 times a week, you still should be taking those in between days for your general physical activity, leaving the office to go for a walk, doing those dynamic movements, foam rolling. I'm not a huge fan of foam rolling before exercise because I think that you can kind of get all the benefits you need from a small cardio and specific warm up, which includes like doing the movements with no weight or really lightweight. But I definitely think there's a place for foam rolling outside of the training sessions because if you want to get simple and not talk about the science, massage just feels good. So if you're feeling really tight and kind of bunched up because those muscle fibers are torn and they're trying to repair, foam rolling is going to localize blood flow to that spot, which should increase your recovery. So you got to maintain that general physical activity if it's just going for a walk or even light cardio is fine. But if you don't recover properly, it's going to come back to get you. All right. So that's why I believe that once you have the general physical activity done, you can then move up to your exercise routine, but the general physical activity still needs to be there. Okay. We can't work out for an hour and then sit at our desks for 15 hours, which is what people do. Honestly, I don't even have the attention span. Maybe I was dropped on my head when I was younger, or all the diet soda that I accidentally consumed when I was a child. But I find it very difficult to sit for an hour without feeling my body just say to me, "It's time to move." It's the human body. It's not meant to be in place for that long. A body at rest stays at rest. So if you're going to treat it that way, you're going to notice that you get lethargic. You're going to notice that you get tight. You're going to start feeling pains in certain places. Your metabolism is going to go down. Your weight is going to go up. So you need to exercise and you need to stay generally active. Okay. So we'll get into more details about structuring an exercise plan based on the different types of exercise. Okay. And that'll be coming in future episodes. So if you have any specific questions right now about your current exercise routine or the things you should be doing on a daily basis to increase your general physical activity for overall well-being, please message me. Once again, there are 2 episodes before this. If you haven't had the chance to listen to them, please do. And I'm always available for questions, so just keep working at it. No matter what, steps forward are steps forward, even if they're small. And if you happen to take a step backwards, you did not fall off a cliff. It was just a step backwards. So have a great week, crush whatever it is that you're doing, and stay well.